Buying a car is an incredibly important decision. In fact, I would argue that in some regard, buying a car is as equal of an important decision as buying a house, simply because of the windfall that could come along from buying a bad car and making a bad deal is a significantly easier decision than that of buying a house. With buying a house, there's a ton of government regulation. There's also the fact that houses more often than not appreciate, especially long term. And with cars, it is very literally the exact opposite. There is very little regulation, and these are depreciating assets, meaning that a car purchase can dig you in a massive hole that could truly ruin your financial future, which means that engaging in a bad car deal is something that could very literally ruin your finances. And that means that buying a car that you can't afford almost has just as bad of ramifications as buying a house that you can't afford. And it's really scary to think about. In fact, there is currently a trend on TikTok that's titled, "What's Your Roman Empire?"
How many times, like a week, or just how many times in general, do you think about the Roman Empire?
And this question is basically asking, what is something that you think about all the time? And mine, aside from Taylor Swift, is how teenagers and people in their early 20s get approved for car loans that cost in the high hundreds, if not low $1,000s per month for cars that they either don't need and simply can't afford, or worse, cars that are very average, like Kia Rio, Ford Focuses, and Mazdas, is how 18-year-olds and people in their early 20s sign up for car loans that they not only don't need, but they simply can't afford, that range in the high hundreds to low $1,000 per month. Or even worse, people who buy normal everyday cars that should be affordable, so things like Kias, Fords, and Chevys, but because of the fact that they don't know anything about personal finance and they have a poor credit history, they get an absurd deal. And these borrowers get sucked into these horrible loans that have high interest rate, long terms, and just simply dig them into a financial hole that's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get out of. And truthfully, this can be life-altering, and in some cases, even life-ruining. Getting into a high-interest, high-payment, long-term auto loan that depreciates like a bomb is a decision that could ultimately lead to a delinquency or a poor credit history report, which could then in turn make every single financial milestone that you want to make in your life extremely difficult, if not entirely impossible. It makes it extremely difficult to borrow money, get a house, buy a car. It sucks. And I've always said that people who say that credit doesn't matter are either incredibly out of touch with society today, or they've been fortunate enough to not have to rely on credit to make these large purchases, or they've never had such a poor credit score that it hinders them from making these big milestone life purchases. I'm looking at you, Dave Ramsey.
Your FICO score is not a sign you are winning with money. It's a sign you have played kissy face with the bank. It is an I love debt score.
Take it from someone that knows from experience. Back in 2018, I had a business that closed, and as a result, my credit took a major hit that it's still recovering from today. And despite the fact that all of the debts from that period of time have been settled in full, my credit score is still just average today. And I still have many of these remarks on my credit score and will for a few more years. And as a result, I have an extremely hard time getting approved for any type of loan other than low-value credit cards. Financing a car, a house, even getting high-profile points-related credit cards are extremely difficult for me to get approved for. And anything in my life that is financed is either co-signed by a relative or is under my husband HP's name. And this is from the perspective of somebody who's a high six-figure earner, so I can't even imagine the difficulties of going through this if you're somebody that makes an average or a below-average income. The point is, buying the right car with the right term is incredibly important. And so in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the 5 red flags that you need to avoid if you're somebody who's looking to buy a car. And because of the fact that buying a car isn't just reliant on the interest rate, purchase price, and term of the loan, it's also dependent on the car itself, I'm going to be breaking down not only some of the flags you should avoid whenever you're financing a car, but also whenever you're inspecting one as well. So let's get started. We cannot talk about a bad car deal without talking about interest rate. Interest rate is one of the biggest factors that will cause financial ruin when it comes to a used or new car purchase. And this is where you hear about these people that are paying every single month of their car loan, and yet they owe more today than what their car was worth at the point of purchase. A 15 to 20% interest rate will absolutely ruin your finances. You look at the worst case scenario of this, something like a modest $28,000 car with a 21% interest rate, which sounds mind-boggling to even talk about. I mean, a 21% interest rate is absolutely crazy, but it's actually in range of a deep subprime borrower. So it's actually not out of the question at all. And you top this off with an 84-month term. And with these terms, we're looking at a $644 per month monthly payment. At the end of the loan, the borrower would have paid $54,114 for a $28,000 car. $26,114 would have just been interest alone. For some of you watching this video, this type of scenario may sound far-fetched, but it simply isn't. And if you are somebody that qualifies as a deep subprime or even subprime borrower, this reality is probably your reality. And these types of loan situations create a financial hole that is extremely difficult to get out of. And it puts you in a spot where if one day comes along where you can no longer afford your car payment, you can't just simply sell that car because you owe significantly more on that car than the car is actually worth. And now at this point, selling the car is an absolute mess. And so whenever it comes to buying a car, never, ever just worry about your monthly payment. You need to look at the full picture, and this full picture includes the worth of the car, how it depreciates, the interest rate, as well as the term, and of course the purchase price as well. Oftentimes, whenever you look at personal finance principles, an 8% interest rate is sort of the highest cap that you should go. And the thought process behind this is that if you were to invest that same money into, say, the stock market, you could expect to get a roughly 8% return on that money. So if you were to get a 8% interest rate, take the money that you would have spent on that car and then put it in the market, you are essentially borrowing the money for free. Now, this is the ideal situation, but I know that many people don't do that. But truthfully, the lower the better. For example, my husband's GT500 has a 3.5% interest rate, and with that rate, we are in absolutely no rush to pay off that car. The point is, interest rate matters. Don't under any circumstances take out an interest rate that is 15, 20, 21%. In fact, in this current market, I probably wouldn't take out anything above 10% unless you were somebody who was planning on paying off that car extremely aggressively and you had a plan on how you're going to go about doing that. But under no circumstances should you take out that type of rate with a 72-month term. Now, if you're somebody who only qualifies for a 10 to 20% interest rate on the car, you're now probably in a pickle where it's like, okay, I don't want to spend 10 to 20% on an interest rate, but I also need to buy a new car. So what the heck am I supposed to do? And that's where buying a cheap cash car comes into play. This is an argument that I hear all of the time. People who buy a newer car because they want the reliability that comes along with it. And so a lot of times whenever people are looking to buy a car, even if their credit score is horrible and their interest rate would be astronomical, they still justify a newer car purchase that's significantly more expensive because they don't want to have to worry about the repairs that come along with an older cash car. But that's whenever buying an older but more reliable car comes into play and how you can ultimately ensure that this car will be reliable. Buying an old car doesn't always mean buying an unreliable car. Take it from somebody who owns 27 older cars, 29 if you count my personal ones. I think the best cars for a buyer on a budget who's putting reliability as their number one priority is the Toyota Yaris. These cars are absolutely bulletproof. Sure, they aren't exactly the coolest car on the road and they certainly aren't loaded with features, but they are extremely reliable. And today in this car market, you can buy a Toyota Yaris that has 175,000 miles for less than $5,000. And that type of Toyota Yaris will last a few years at least. My 2007 Toyota Yaris with 200,000 miles that is abused by Turo renters each and every day is significantly more reliable than my 2015 Kia Rio with only 100,000 miles. In fact, my 1997 Toyota 4Runner that has 350,000 miles is more reliable than my 2015 Kia Rio. Now, if you're somebody who's wanting to buy an older, cheaper, more reliable car, then a pre-purchase inspection is going to be absolutely crucial. If you know cars and you feel comfortable doing a PPI yourself, then I would encourage you to do that. But if you aren't somebody who understands cars and you certainly don't want to put that weight on yourself to determine whether or not a car is a good buy, then I would encourage you to outsource that PPI to someone else. And there's really 3 valid options that you could pursue. Number 1 is reach out to the car community. My husband, HP, who does all of my PPIs, is a car guy through and through. And through him, I've been able to see the car community and the people that are a part of that. And I think that you would be surprised at not only how knowledgeable, but also how helpful many of these people within the car community actually are. And while if you're a buyer on a real budget and you don't mind reaching out to random strangers on the internet, you could join a couple of car groups and ask somebody within those car groups if they would be willing to do a PPI for you for about $50 or a free dinner. Sure, there will probably be people that tell you to kick rocks, but there will be others who are happy to help. This probably isn't the ideal scenario because a car enthusiast isn't going to know as much as a proper car mechanic, but it's still a great path to pursue if you're somebody who's really wanting to squeeze the money out of this. Number 2, if you have no car community connections, just going to a local auto repair shop or even something like a Firestone and asking them to do the PPI. This can oftentimes be much cheaper than going to a dealership, and these mechanics that work at these shops are extremely qualified. Depending on your situation, you can even try to give them a bit of a sob story to try to discount the rate, but the effectiveness of that will definitely depend on the situation. And number 3, probably the most ideal scenario is to go to a proper dealership for whatever make and model the car that you're looking to buy is, and hiring a technician there to do a PPI. This is definitely the most expensive, but it's also the most thorough. The third mistake that you should avoid is never, ever pay above market value for a car. Just don't do it. You should never, ever walk into a dealership without having an understanding of what type of car you're looking for, the price you want to pay, as well as the term that you can expect to get for that car. But on top of all of this, you should also have a clear understanding of what this car is worth and what a fair market and below market value price is for that car. A car is not worth what a salesman says it is or what a dealership is willing to sell a car for, because MSRP has become basically worthless nowadays. Advertised price also means nothing, and dealerships kind of suck. And truthfully, if a car that a dealership or a seller has listed online doesn't even really match what KBB has valued that car as, or what comparable cars are priced at for the market, I probably wouldn't even go look at it. Just don't waste your time. There are great deals to be found in this current car market, but you are very rarely going to find those deals by strolling into a dealership on a random afternoon, without doing market research beforehand and without knowing what to expect before you walk through those doors. When calculating how much you want to spend on a car, take the full picture into account. What's the rate and term you're looking for? What is the car, and how is the depreciation of that car going to look? What is the maintenance of these cars, and how do all of these things fit into your budget? And you really truthfully should only be going to a dealership once you found a car that have met all of these pieces of criteria. And if a dealership won't meet your terms for these items, then I would shop elsewhere. Buying above market value on a car very literally means that you're throwing money down the toilet. If you are looking at a car and you're only able to find that car for a below market value price, then you should either wait or you should put your eyes on a different vehicle that is found for much cheaper. And sure, there are some scenarios where somebody is just so filthy rich that they can put $50,000 above MSRP down for a 2024 G-Wagon, but the reality is most of us, including myself, do not fall into that category. And so unless you're filthy rich, buying above market value just doesn't ever make sense. And instead, buying below market value provides you with a level of insurance so that you know that if something happens, if the car gets totaled, if you need to sell the car, you have the ability to do that and recoup most of your cost for that vehicle, or at least as much as you owe on that car. And you're not going to be stuck in a situation where you now have to go get a loan for the difference, you're stuck not being able to sell the car. It just protects you from a wide variety of worst case scenarios. It's crucial, and believe it or not, there are below market value deals everywhere. The fourth mistake to avoid is never, ever, ever trust your car salesman. People are liars. I hate to be that person, but it's the truth. For better or for worse, I am a skeptical person by nature, so unless somebody has proven to me that what they're saying is true and that they can be trusted, I pretty much assume that everybody's lying. And while this does create some issues in my personal life, it has served me very well in my business life. The fact is, you shouldn't be trusting anyone whenever it comes to the purchase of your vehicle. You should only trust the people that are officially on your team, so maybe your spouse, a family member, or the people that are hired to help you, like somebody conducting a PPI. But never trust the sellers themselves, and especially never trust somebody that has a financial benefit of getting you to buy a car. For example, if you're in a test drive and the person who's selling the car begins to list a laundry list of items and things that they've recently addressed and fixed and upgraded to the car, don't trust them. Verify it. My husband HP and I have an inside joke where we keep tabs of the amount of times a car seller tells us that something is an easy fix. It happens all the time, or when someone tells us a certain behavior of a car is normal. Recently, we looked at a Mazda 5 and the seller was going through some of the things that the car needed. Oh, there's a fluid leak, but it's an easy fix. Okay, well, if it's an easy fix, why didn't you fix it? Surely it would have helped the value of this car and it would have helped you sell it, because it's probably not an easy fix. Or a few months ago, we were test driving a Mazda 3, which we own 2 of, so we are very familiar with the car, and as we were driving, the car trans was shuddering, and the seller said, oh, that's very normal for these cars. No, it's not. One of the worst purchases we've ever made was a 2009 Kia years ago. The engine had some sludge on it, but the guy who was a mechanic said that he had just changed the engine components to fix the sludging issue, and he just forgot to clean the area of the bay. And despite everything we know about cars, we actually listened to him. We bought the car and it was the worst purchase ever. This guy was 100% lying. The point is, anything that a car seller tells you, you should verify the information. And if you can't verify it, and if it can make or break the car deal, then you just have to pass. Obviously, for more minor things, it may not matter and you may be interested in buying the car whether or not you can verify. But especially for these major issues that may come up, you have to verify everything. Never, ever trust the seller, whether that person's private party, a dealership, or a general manager. And last, but certainly not least, is pay attention to those stupid fees. You need to make sure that you read your loan paperwork and that you understand every aspect of the term of the loan. And you should be pushing back on any additional fees, whether it be a doc fee, dealer add-ons, warranty, things like that. And truthfully, if you don't know how to do this, or if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, you should find somebody who does, who can help you. This is where tapping into your local network can be extremely helpful, because if you aren't comfortable buying a car, looking through loan docs and term sheets, then find somebody who can help you. And in some cases, this may actually involve swallowing a bit of your pride. I would be willing to bet that you know somebody, either a friend of a friend, or even a Facebook friend that works in finance, has experience at dealerships, or is extremely well-versed in personal finance. And you should reach out to them and say, hey, I know this is a weird message, but I'm buying this car. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you look at this deal? If a friend of a friend or a Facebook friend of mine sent me this type of message, I would 100% help them out. And I know many of my friends who are also in this space would do the same thing. I know that I talk about this type of thing all the time, so for regular viewers of this channel, this information is nothing new. But following these steps whenever you're buying a car is just so incredibly important, especially for your financial future. And this is especially important if you're somebody who's young, if you haven't purchased a car in the past, or if you're somebody who's on a tight budget. Buying and even financing a car isn't a bad decision in and of itself. In fact, a lot of times it can make a lot of sense. But buying a car with an incredibly high interest rate with a high purchase price that stretches your budget too thin, well, that's where buying a car can become an absolute disaster. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.